The Girl Who Escaped from Home. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in a very, very big house. And she was the daughter of a very, very rich family. She was the only daughter, but her mommy and daddy were very, very cruel and very, very mean. She lived in one of the biggest houses in town, but it might as well have been the smallest because she felt trapped and she felt like she wanted to escape. And that is exactly what she tried to do. One night, when her mommy and daddy were asleep, she sneaked out from under her very heavy blanket. She put on some warm clothes that she could go out into the night. Now, did I tell you that this story took place about 200 years ago? A time when there was no electricity, no TVs, or cell phones, or games like Nintendo Switches. So, the girl had to find some candles and some matches so she could find her way outside. She found the candles and matches, and as she walked down the big long hallway, down the big round staircase, she almost dropped the matches and candle and almost woke her parents up. I don't want to wake up my parents, she thought. If they catch me, I'll never get out of this big house. You see, the reason why she wanted to escape, the reason why she didn't want to stay there, was because her parents were so mean. The house had about 20 slaves and maids and cooks and cleaners, and the mommy and daddy were always shouting and hitting and making them do terrible work. And the girl, who didn't do a day's work in her life, felt very sorry for all these workers. And she couldn't do anything about it. So she wanted to send a message. And she thought, if she runs away, that will be a message that her parents will hear loud and clear. Standing at the top of the staircase, looking down, she didn't know whether to go back to her room or run. She took a deep breath, put the candles in a pocket, and tiptoed down the steps. She came to the big front door, which was very hard to open. It took about 20 minutes just to lift the hatch. She lifted it off, opened the door, and stood out into the dark, pitch-black, cold night. It was very quiet. But when she lit the match and put it into the candle and put it into the lens of the lantern, she was able to see the light shone the path all the way down the road, and she walked quite quickly because she didn't want to wake up her mommy and daddy. At the bottom of the road there was a path going to the right and one going to the left. She didn't know which way to go, so she just went left, and she followed the road all the way down, and it led to the forest. And at the forest there were two entrances, one to the left and one to the right. And she didn't know which way to go, so she just took the one to the right, and she went into the deep, dark forest. And she was scared. She was scared because she didn't know what was in the forest. She'd never been there before, and she'd heard lots of stories of wolves and bears that growl and eat little girls like her. She'd heard of the gruffalo and all other kinds of things like that. But you know what? She'd never seen a gruffalo, nor a bear or a wolf. But she'd seen her mommy and daddy hitting all those cleaners and workers, so she knew she was definitely scared of that. But she didn't know if she would be scared of something she hadn't seen before, like a wolf or a bear. So she started to walk into the deep dark forest, And then she started to hear the noises, and the noises grew louder and louder and louder. The noises were of owls and birds and maybe growls of what seemed like bears. Now she did start to get worried and scared.
Is anyone there?
She didn't know which way she was going, so she started to run faster and faster into the forest. And she got to the place where she thought she could see the moon through the tops of the trees, and it was light. And she stopped, and her heart was racing and the blood was pumping, and she couldn't hear the noises anymore, so she sat down. She was so tired because it was the middle of the night, and she fell asleep under the stars. The next day, she woke up, and she was in the middle of a nice forest, and she didn't know what to do, so she kept walking in the same way she was going that night before. She walked and she walked, and she walked some more, and she walked for miles and miles. Sometimes she stopped, and she picked the fruit from the trees. She knew that she was going to be all right, and she started to walk up a big, long hill. And she got to the top of the hill, and she could see the sea. She could see the ocean. She could see boats coming in and going out, and the blue water splashing its waves on to the shore. She ran down there, and she snuck onto a ship where nobody could see. And just as the ship was about to leave, the captain saw this little girl. "Hey, what are you doing on my ship?" "I'm running away from my mummy and daddy." "Why are you doing that, young little girl?" "That's such a silly thing to do at an age like yours." "It's because they're mean and they're hitting all the cleaners and the maids. I don't like it. I want to escape." "Where do your mommy and daddy live?" said the captain. "They live in a big house in the town." "Right." So the captain stopped the ship from sailing, and he got off with the little girl, and he took some of his men and horses and drove the horses and carriages all the way to the girl's house. They got to the girl's house, and the captain stepped out and knocked on the girl's door quite hard. The dad opened. The captain looked at him very angrily, and then he shouted, "Hey, are you this girl's father?" "Yes," said the daddy. "Well, I want you to stop treating the workers here like you have been doing, because your daughter almost got onto my ship that was going to sail away around the world. And you would never ever see your daughter again if we'd set sail. So, what you have to do is stop hitting and being cruel to these people that work in your big house if you want to live with your daughter." Well, suddenly, in 1 second, the mummy and daddy realized what they had been doing, and they promised the captain of the ship, who was very big and scary looking, that they would never do it again. They promised, and they begged. And so, the captain gave the little girl a hug and said, "Don't worry. There you go. Go on, run to your parents." And the little girl ran to their mummy and daddy and gave them a big hug, and they went back into the house. And from that day on, the very, very rich parents in the very, very big house treated all the workers very, very well. In fact, they all became part of the family and treated each other very nicely. And the girl grew up to have a big house of her own with lots of cleaners and cooks and gardeners and people to help. And she treated them very, very nicely. Because that day when she ran away, she learned 2 things. One of them was that it's silly to run away from something that you're scared of, because you can tackle it yourself. And 2, sometimes you need somebody like a sailor to come and help you, to tell people what's right and what's wrong. And some people do change, and that you can really, really live happily forever. The end.